Today we're going to talk about the commodity audience. And so, as Douglas notes, interest in the audience emerged as a means of quantifying who was watching and why. And this allowed advertisers to spend their money targeting consumers that they were interested in reaching. It also led to the development of particular types of programming aimed to attract particular types of consumers. And so here I'm drawing on the work of Brian Dilber in the reading you read, Blind Spots and Blurred Lines, Dallas Smythe, The Audience Commodity, and the Transformation of Labor in the Digital Age. So what is the commodity audience? And we can begin by thinking about this. What are some stereotypes associated with watching TV? Some things that might have occurred to you would be, leisure time, bumming around on the couch, laziness. The terms couch potato happen a lot. And so what Smythe kind of innovated here was thinking about TV as work. And so we might begin to think of that as kind of strange, go, huh? I go from couch potato zoning out in the evenings before bed to being told that I'm actually working. How are you figuring that? So Smythe, he was an economist at the FCC in the 1940s and founded the political economy tradition in media studies. And he noted that in the post-war area, so beginning around the 1950s, the labor movement had helped bring about the 8-hour workday and the 40-hour work week. And so it wasn't until really the post-war area that the weekend was a thing. And workers received high wages during this era. So even industrial workers, people in the factories and so on, made middle-class incomes. And this encouraged them to become consumers. They had spending money. And this sort of perpetuated a particular form of consumer capitalism. And so one of the things Smythe noted was that leisure time, the evenings, the time we spent after our 8-hour workday and our weekends, were being spent with mass media. And so rather than reading books or walking through a park, people were gathering around the television set, or previously the radio, and currently the internet. So one of the things we realize is TV to this day, and this is coming from 2014, spend most of their time watching TV. Average minutes per day, you can see it far exceeds anything else we're doing, by and large. And so it's important to think about, how do television networks make a profit? And why do advertisers buy advertising time? And what makes this time valuable? And so, as Douglas notes, it was a real interest in knowing who the audience was so that you could better sell the ad time. Well, this makes watching similar to working. And so we can move from thinking about factory models to sitting on the couch and watching television. And both are labor. And this is because, as Smythe argued, in a Marxist sense, advertising time is made valuable by people watching television. Because we're generating money, we're generating value for a company through our viewing, television is a form of labor. So the mass media audience becomes a commodity. You can think of commodity as an undifferentiated, mass-marketed good. And so audiences are seen as a sort of homogenous group of people that view. And researchers, as Douglas and Dilber note, as well as Kara and Lowe, have paid a lot of attention to differentiation within audiences. But at the end of the day, we're really selling ears and eyeballs. So people and commodities exist in a social process. And so audiences work. We're performing particular types of labor with our viewing. And we're also then the principal product of the mass media. And so in this formation, media content exists to generate audiences. And that really informs how we think about who is watching and what programming is going to be created. So we're doing work for advertisers in our heads by watching and consuming advertisements. And so we're producing audiences and thinking about the creation of media content to market commodities, candidates, and issues to. And so audiences are constructed through media programming as particular groups of people. And so for Smythe, media content was the equivalent of a free lunch. And so the content is what is used to attract and keep audiences. And they want the content then to cultivate a mood conducive to a favorable reaction to advertisers' messages. And so this is going to create a particular type of content, people that leaves people in a good mood, eager to buy things. You're also going to create content aimed at audiences that are valuable to advertisers. And so those are going to be people with disposable incomes that are able to buy goods and services, or people who are interested in particular social issues, and so on. And we can think about audience differentiation. Particular audiences watch The Walking Dead versus, say, Toddlers and Tiaras. And of course, some people watch both. So as we work as audience members, people reproduce their own labor power. We're generating money and extracting value. So labor power under capitalism, our ability to work, is a personal possession. We possess that and sell it from wages. Now, generally thinking, when we're not at a job, we don't sell our work. However, this is a misunderstanding. In general, we aren't paid for all our labor time. And so while we might be working and generating the product, some of the money we generate or the value we create goes to pay for management, cover interest on, say, business loans, and generate profits. And so you have surplus value that leads to profits. And now, with the innovation of the audience, away from the job, our labor time is still sold, even though we don't sell it. The media companies do. So how are audiences working if this happens during leisure time? One of the key things here is that free time or leisure time is an upper class concept. Up until the 1950s, that wasn't something that the working classes enjoyed. So working people have had to spend all their time not at a job, preparing to be at a job. And so now that time, beginning in the 1950s, is spent buying and using consumer goods. And under a Keynesian economy, this was necessary to maintain demand. And so if you're making cars at a factory, you need people to buy the cars so you can continue making them. Henry Ford famously, somewhat apocryphally, claimed that he was going to pay his workers enough that they could afford to buy the product. That's incredibly smart because that's how you sell things. And so we wind up producing more capital in our leisure time. So this brings a question: what is your labor worth? As an audience member, what type of value are you generating? So take the 2017 Super Bowl, for example. And this isn't a picture from the 2017 Super Bowl, but whatever. They charged $5 million for a 30-second ad spot. That means 1 second of advertising during the 2017 Super Bowl generated $166,666.66. That's how much it costs to air 1 second of advertising. With 111.3 million viewers, it cost, for every viewer they made for the network, $1.85 for each second of advertisements that they watched. And now, of course, we're familiar with the notion that nobody wants to watch advertising. But, however, for the Super Bowl, it works differently. The Super Bowl ads have become a cultural phenomenon. They're leaked early to create excitement. And so despite the astronomical costs, it is a desirable viewing time. It's also one of the few mass viewing events that we have left. And so audiences have become fragmented, and tend to be much smaller than they were throughout most of broadcast television and radio's history. But the Super Bowl, 111.3 million viewers, quite a few people. And one of the things to think about in terms of advertising, a recent poll found that 17.7% of adults say that advertisements are the most important part of the Super Bowl. And so for advertisers, that $1.85 per second we're making for the broadcast network that airs the Super Bowl is quite valuable to them, and they're willing to spend that money because we're one of the rare instances where we're paying attention to the advertisements. These figures are coming from a few years ago, but when American Idol was at its height, each viewer watching the show generated 67 cents of profit for the network. So Smythe compares television programming to a free lunch, and the content of media, getting to watch the Super Bowl or American Idol or Friends, is the wages we get in return for watching the ads. So one of the take-home points is labor can be enjoyable, but it's still labor. We're still working and we're still generating value. So one of the things that audiences, how the audience comes to matter, is that advertisers want to know where and when to buy ads. Networks want to know how to attract the most lucrative audiences. And then we want to get as much free lunch or content while doing as little work or as little advertising watching as possible. And so some things to think about. Who is excluded from the ratings? Audience measurement, it's meant to measure the consumer cast. We only want people that have buying power. Initially, as Douglas notes, this was linked to telephone listings. Now it's often linked to cable subscription. Since 1987, ratings tend to underestimate audiences and favor advertisers. And the way that the rating systems work, one of the systems, household members had to push their button every 15 minutes to be counted. And so every household member would have a button. Men were more likely to use these systems and children were less likely to use. And so with these measurement tools, we have, some problems in not being accurate in terms of who is watching, but we also see the interest in who gets measured being skewed in favor of those with disposable income and people who advertisers would want to reach out to. So how do we avoid watching ads? And with every new technological development, advertisers have to kind of scramble to see how to best both quantify and reach viewers. So some of the technological solutions that have emerged started with channel surfing and the remote control. Then we later had DVR, TiVo emerged, as well as DVDs. You could wait and buy your program on DVD instead. And now we have streaming and downloading services. And so these are ways that we can get around television viewing. But of course, media producers are also finding ways to get around our ways of getting around watching ads. So how do they keep workers watching? So things such as product placement become more prominent, banner ads, digital insertions. So they'll sometimes go back into older television shows when they go to re-release them or place them on streaming services and add in advertisements and product placement. And then we also have unavoidable online ads. And so if we click on a link to a news article, you get that pop-up ad or sort of a page that will run an advertisement unless you click to continue to the website. They also position television in particular time slots to appeal to various audiences. And this certainly increased with beginning of the 1980s as more households had more than one television show. And so rather than family programming, we began to get more specific niche marketing. So some things that happened, Murphy Brown was a television show that featured a Candice Bergen as a strong kind of feminist icon. She was a news anchor. And so it was a comedy And they aired it opposite Monday Night Football, figuring that Monday Night Football was going to attract male viewers, but women viewers might be more likely to tune into Murphy Brown, and they wouldn't be competing against a show that might appeal to the same audience. Similarly, The Simpsons aired opposite The Cosby Show, very different sensibilities in each show. And 90210 was aired against Cheers in the original airing of it. 90210 appealing to teenagers, a very valuable advertising demographic, and Cheers had been a long mainstay of the sitcom genre. Brings us to product placement. And so 30 Rock had a very valuable audience demographic. Its ratings were not always great, but people tended to DVR it and watch it later. But the audience tended to be upper middle class, a very lucrative consumer segment. And so product placement became a way the show was able to integrate advertising revenue into its format.
I'm sorry, you're saying you want us to use the show to sell stuff?
Look, I know how this sounds.
No, come on, Jack, we're not doing that. We're not compromising the integrity of the show to sell.
Wow, this is Diet Snapple?
I know, it tastes just like regular Snapple, doesn't it?
You should try pomegranate. It's amazing.
I only date guys who drink Snapple.
Look, we all love Snapple. Lord knows I do, but focus here.
Is advertising with that wink that we talked about a few weeks ago. They're acknowledging quite openly that they're doing product placement, and in doing it in this manner, somewhat satirically, they're positioning themselves in some ways you pay more attention to it than if they were simply drinking it, while they're also acknowledging that they're putting one over on us by making us listen to this advertisement.
David, one time you said product placement is bullshit. At the same thing...
I just said even more than that.
At the same time, you work to advertising Gucci. Did you change your mind about advertising last days?
No.
No.
I do sometimes commercials to make money.
Eu faço esses comerciais de vez em quando para ganhar dinheiro.
But I always say, every time I learn something.
Mas eu sempre digo, toda vez eu aprendo alguma coisa.
Efficiency of saying something.
A eficiência de se dizer algo.
And new technologies.
E novas tecnologias.
But product placement in a film.
Mas merchandising num filme.
Putrefies the environment.
Putrifica o ambiente.
It's so absurd.
É tão absurdo.
But it's happening more and more.
Mas está acontecendo cada vez mais.
What kind of a world is this?
Que tipo de mundo é esse?
So, David Lynch doesn't mince words on his use of product placement in film and television. So, while he acknowledges the economic incentive to participate in advertising and indeed some of the creative rewards, he also is taking a hard stand against the, in favor of the purity of film